Just as the media in the US and here in Australia, including the taxpayer-funded ABC, just as they ran protection for President Joe Biden, they're now running protection for Kamala Harris. And the ABC, funded by your taxes and beholden under law to be fair and unbiased, well, they're running that protection for Harris in an odious way. Now, we all know how dishonest this leftist media is because they all tried to hide the feebleness of Joe Biden. They either didn't show you his brain fades and embarrassing episodes, they deliberately censored them, or they made excuses for them. And even up until a few weeks ago, they were telling you that Joe Biden was the wise choice to be re-elected and serve another 4 years. Think about that. Even Vice President Kamala Harris, who must have seen this incapacity up close and often, even she was pretending this bloke could lead the free world until 2029, and she kept saying that even after his disastrous debate performance last month.
Whether it be the person I see in the Oval Office who is meeting with heads of the military and the intelligence community and in the Situation Room, ensuring the safety of America, the person I see in Joe Biden on the world stage, convening world leaders who often ask for his advice, most recently just during the G7 conference. So I'm not going to spend all night with you talking about the last 90 minutes when I've been watching the last 3.5 years of performance.
Extraordinary, isn't it? How can voters trust Harris ever again? But what about the media? I told you that with Biden withdrawing from the race and Harris to be the candidate, she'd get a dream run from the media, a honeymoon really, even before the election. But to see this swing into action, well, it's really something.
Kamala Harris standing there as President of the United States, damn. Like I said, this could be bigger than Obama.
Kamala Harris has the energy they know it takes to defeat Donald Trump.
A phenomenal candidate, a ton of energy.
She had this great speech where she was talking about all these different things.
We have an incredible candidate that I know Kamala Harris is, she's going to win this.
I just felt goosebumps as I heard myself saying that's Kamala Harris and she's going to be the next president.
Yeah, why bother with an election? Hey, just swear her in now. But here in Australia, fresh from making excuses for Biden, the ABC is now riding shotgun for Kamala Harris. On Media Watch, host Paul Barry is supposed to be an objective observer, but he just uses the weekly program to promote his green left political causes and slam his perceived ideological enemies at News Corp and especially here at Sky News. Here's his latest effort.
Crazy, cackling Kamala is not a new idea. But Donald Trump was hitting it hard last week, and the Murdoch media in Australia were joining in, with Sky After Dark's commentators lining up to repeat Trump's trope and paint Harris, a former prosecutor and Attorney General, as crazy and dumb, with Chris Kenny kicking it off at 5 p.m. last Monday.
Harris has confounded audiences around the world by breaking into inexplicable laughter at uncomfortable moments. Well, as usual, Barry is deliberately deceptive. He selectively clips his material to create misleading impressions. He does it every week. And to start with, in this latest piece of publicly funded fake news, he pretended people like me were taking our cues to criticise Harris now from Donald Trump or from Fox News, when in fact Barry must know, because he and his team watch us closely, they must know that plenty of us have criticised Harris for 4 years since she was first chosen by Joe Biden. Joe Biden chose his running mate in the election campaign this year largely on identity grounds. He declared that his vice presidential running mate would be a woman, and his team made it clear she would be a woman of colour, which all worked very well for Kamala Harris. Watch out for Kamala Harris in this next bit of the interview. First, she helps out Joe Biden with the timing of his meeting with the National Association for the Advancement of Coloured People. And then later, as she looks on, perhaps she's wondering how long it will be till she fills Joe Biden's shoes.
I'm going to be meeting with the NAACP board, I guess, and they told me
Tuesday, I think.
Tuesday.
Yeah.
And so look, my job, their job is to push me. Every special interest, and I don't say that in a negative way, every advocacy group out there is pushing for more and more and more of what they want. That's their job. My job is to keep my commitment, to make the decisions, and when it's all over, people will take a look and say, I promise you, you'll see the most diverse cabinet, representative of all folks, Asian Americans, African Americans, Latinos, LGBTQ, across the board.
Yeah, there they go again with the full identity checklist. It's pretty distasteful, isn't it? And illiberal, this preoccupation with race, gender or sexual preferences. But the left love it, and there's no doubt about the role it played in the selection of Kamala Harris. All that is on the record.
And this morning, all across the nation, little girls woke up, especially little black and brown girls, who so often feel overlooked and undervalued in their communities. But today, just maybe, they're seeing themselves for the first time in a new way as the stuff of president and vice president.
Little black and brown girls? How patronising to Harris and to so many Americans. This is the trouble with identity picks. And at the ABC, Paul Barry seems to recognise Harris as an identity pick, but he verbals others doing the same.
Before choosing Harris to be his running mate, Joe Biden said he would pick a woman and would prefer a person of colour. Cue Chris Kenny on Sky to imply that is her only qualification.
The truth is, of course, Harris was a diversity pick. Yeah, well, actually, he verbals me, does Paul Barry, but he cut it right off there because I went on to list many of her failings, like the abject political failure of having to withdraw from the 2020 Democrat primary race before a single vote was cast, or how she travelled abroad and confused the US ally, South Korea, with its enemy, North Korea.
The United States shares a very important relationship, which is an alliance with the Republic of North Korea. And it is an alliance that is strong and enduring.
Or how about when she was tasked to deliver one priority policy outcome to fix the drastic illegal immigration problem on the US-Mexico border? And not only did she fail to stem the flow, but she seemed to try to lie about whether or not she'd visited the border to assess the problem.
Do you have any plans to visit the border?
At some point, we are going to the border. We've been to the border. So this whole thing about the border, we've been to the border. We've been to the border.
You haven't been to the border.
And I haven't been to Europe. And I don't understand the point that you're making.
There's that laugh again. Just terrible, isn't it? Just a terrible effort. But Paul Barry and the ABC don't want anyone to know about that. And when it comes to that laughing, they don't tell ABC viewers how it often happens in diplomatic meetings at uncomfortable times relating to serious issues, seemingly because she doesn't know what to say.
President Duda, I wanted to know if you think, and if you asked the United States to specifically accept more refugees.
Okay. A friend in need is a friend indeed.
Okay, I can first.
Yeah, Barry on the ABC showed none of this. The ABC have censored all these over the years too, just like they also failed to show their viewers the inane set-piece speeches from the Vice President, who Democrats and seemingly the ABC now are promoting to take over as the President of the US.
I can imagine what can be and be unburdened by what has been, you know? What can be unburdened by what has been. 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 What we can see, what we believe can be unburdened by what has been. What can be unburdened by what has been.
Spare us, hey? I mean, you're familiar with this cringeworthy stuff, but ABC viewers won't be. This is biased and disingenuous work from the leftist media, especially the ABC, to hide the failings of the presidential candidate. It's unethical, it breaks faith with the public they serve. But it's the rule rather than the exception, so it doesn't really surprise us. Still, with Barry and Media Watch, I don't mind saying that what I find most obnoxious is the personal slights. Slights he must know are wrong, or at least he should. For instance, he lists me as a Trump supporter, which all you know is never been the case. Just because you see the flaws of the Democrats and you don't join in the juvenile and ceaseless criticism of everything Trump says and does doesn't make you a Trumpster. Not that there's anything wrong with that. But especially offensive is Barry's insinuation that I and others criticise Harris because of her skin colour and her gender. He has no basis for making such disgusting smears, but he deliberately leaves that odious suggestion out there all the same. In fact, as the daughter of an Indian immigrant, Kamala Harris shares not just the gender, but a significant part of her ethnic heritage with my wife, and therefore my 2 children. So Barry ought to be ashamed of his smears. But he won't be. He takes a salary from taxpayers like you and I, and he uses it to run an ideological program that attempts to demonise those who disagree with him. You thought it was your ABC. They think it's their ABC. But for Paul Barry, well, he runs amok like it's his ABC because nobody is in charge over there. As to the substance here, Kamala Harris is hopeless. She has a woeful political record, especially as Vice President, and she will fly high for a while as media commentators in the US pump her up and attack her critics, just like Paul Barry does. But the public will eventually make up their own minds. The only question, the critical question, is whether they do that before or after the November election.